I want to tell you today the story of how Stalin ended his life. The real story, the story you won't hear in the newspapers. Who killed Stalin? How did that happen? Stalin was an evil person, terrible, terrible person. And this has to do with the power of Purim. Purim has such power in the day. It says, Chayav inish lebesumeh b'Purim. A person has to drink on Purim until he doesn't know the difference between Baruch Mordechai, blessed is Mordechai, and cursed be Haman. But let's tell you the story. It was 1953. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was holding a Fabrengen in Chabad headquarters, 770 Eastern Parkway. And the Rebbe had already said a deep, esoteric talk called the Maimer, followed by a couple of sichas. And then the Rebbe held onto his white handkerchief to say another Maimer. But before he did that, he said the following story. He said it happened in the days of the Rebbe Rashab, who was the fifth Chabad Rebbe. And the Rebbe Rashab told his students to go and vote for a certain person at the polling stations. So this Chassid, he didn't listen to the radio. He had no idea who the politicians were, but he knew he got an order from the Rebbe. So he went into the mikveh, he put on his hat and jacket and his gartel, he put on everything, his robes on, and he went to the voting polls and he voted exactly according to the instructions the Rebbe gave him. When he came out, he noticed a couple of Russians drinking and they going into this chant. And the chant was, hooray, hooray, hooray. That's what they were chanting, on and on and on. And this student didn't understand Russian, but the words sounded in Hebrew to him. Hooray is hu-ra, which means in Hebrew, he is bad. Hoo-ra. So he started chanting. He thought this was part of the whole voting process. Hoo-ra. He is bad. Hoo-ra, hoo-ra, hoo-ra. And as the Rebbe is telling the story, the Rebbe started becoming so intense and so serious. The Rebbe stood up and the Rebbe said, hoo-ra, 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 he is bad. And the Hasidim standing there realized something is transpiring, something is happening. And so they all started chanting. The whole hundreds of people in the room started chanting, hoo-ra, he is bad, hoo-ra, he is bad. And then the Rebbe gave a deep esoteric talk, another mimer, which was very, very uncharacteristic and never happened before, that the Rebbe should say a second talk. And in that second talk, the Rebbe explained how powerful Purim is, that it draws down spiritual energy from sublime heights, that Haman thought that he could subdue the Jews. Haman thought he could bring down the Jews. But what God showed him is that no matter what, he loves the Jews, will always protect them, will always be there for them. This was the gist of the mimer, focusing on the word Purim, which is pur, which means a lottery, which means that no matter what happens, God loves us and chooses us. Now, the history in Russia and the Soviet Union at the time was, there was something called the Doctor's Plot, where they had arrested numerous Jewish doctors and they had put them on trial for trying to poison the Russian population, trying to, kill Russians. And the whole thing was fake. The whole thing was made up. And Stalin at the time, the plan was that once these Jewish doctors are put on trial, and they tortured them, but once they put on trial and they, so to speak, admit to their mistakes, they will incite the whole Russian population to make pogroms, commit pogroms against the Jews. And Stalin would then have to come in and save the Jews. And he already pre-planned a massive concentration camp, basically, massive camps in Siberia to take all the Jews, all the millions of Jews in Russia, take them all there and place them there. And over there he would kill them. That was the plan. That was the Doctor's Plot. Stalin was in a way worse than Hitler. He was a Jew hater. He was terrible, terrible, terrible anti-Semite, terrible person. While the Rebbe was telling the story of Hurrah, while the Rebbe was reciting the Maimer, was something like 3 a.m. in Russia, Joseph Stalin, the dictator, had a massive heart attack or stroke, and he died. And the Russian media didn't tell it right away. They said, oh, he had this, oh, he had that. And only days later, maybe even weeks later, they come out and tell the story that Stalin died on Purim 1953. And if you look at the dates and the times, it was the exact time, exact moment that the Rebbe said these words on Purim in New York. You see the power of Purim. Purim is a day which draws down such intense spiritual energy that we could all of us tap into it. It's the happiest day on the Jewish calendar. It's the day that has these blessings. There was another time on Purim, the Rebbe, was drinking in the Farbrengen, and he said, there's two kinds of trials and tribulations that God gives us. One is from poverty. When a person is poor, when he doesn't have money, it's a certain kind of temptation, of trial. And then there's another kind of trial, which is a trial of riches. When a person is rich, his ego and his things, his Yetzer Hara convinces him that he's such an important person, and his evil inclination is able to make him do sins. And the Rebbe said, does anybody here want to be rich? Does anybody want the blessing of being rich? Pick up your hand. Know that there's a lot of trials and tribulations associated with being rich. But if you want, it's yours right now. There was a certain momentum right then. And most people in the room didn't pick up their hands, but there were about 5 or 6 individuals that all picked up their hands. And they said, we want to be rich. And all of those 6 people became very, very, very wealthy. One of them was Shmuel Isaac Popak in Crown Heights. He became very wealthy. He actually wrote to the Rebbe afterwards. He says, I want to buy 2 buildings, but I have no money. So the Rebbe told him, in the United States of America, you actually don't need cash to buy buildings. You borrow here, borrow there, which is exactly what he did. He borrowed here, he borrowed there, and he soon enough got a whole portfolio of buildings and became a very, very wealthy man. So Purim has this unique spiritual energy contained in the day. And all we need to do is latch onto it. Go to that energy, hang on to it, draw it in, and this year, may this be your happiest Purim yet. May you draw down all those beautiful, spiritual, sublime energy that exists in that day for blessings for you, for your family, and all Am Yisrael. May this year be the year that we witness the coming of Mashiach, which will end all our problems.